Hello and welcome to the True North CFL podcast. My name is Jimmy Leach. You can follow me on Twitter at aka Jimmy Leach.
I'm Taylor Curry, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, Taylor Curry SK.
And I'm Joe Horn. You can find me on Instagram, Joe_Horn_8. And that is Instagram.
Alright, so before we begin this podcast, we're going to start with a little synopsis of what we're about. So each week we're going to be covering the previous week's games, we're going to do some fantasy, we're going to talk news, and lastly we're going to go with our predictions for each week. So without further ado, we're going to talk Bombers versus Lions. Firstly, we're going to discuss, is Andrew Harris the greatest Canadian CFL player of all time, with him recently getting the all-purpose yards leader of all Canadians in history?
Well, I think that he's pretty close up there. John Cornish was a pretty good running back, but I think Andrew Harris is better, and his real competition in that department would be Ben Cahoon, and that's a toss-up.
Yeah, I agree with you too there because since I've been watching the CFL, Cornish, he's a big name. Done a ton of great stuff. He's accomplished a ton. Canadian Football League Hall of Famer, went in this year. But I mean, Andrew Harris, he just does it from both sides as a running back. He'll get you receiving, he'll get you rushing yards. So I mean, he's a do-it-all back, and I think in my time, I think he's the best Canadian.
I'm inclined to agree with in recent memory Harris and Cahoon. It's hard for me to say, because Cahoon was just such a good receiver. But when you compare Harris and Cahoon just as nationals too, right? Like one's from Utah and didn't really spend too much time in Canada, with Ben Cahoon speaking. I think his mom was Canadian, and that's how he got considered a national, whereas Harris is a born and bred Canadian, and even his players too. Harris is that great back. He's a good power back, but he's also a wonderful receiving back. So the fact that he has that kind of game where he can kind of do it all, I think, yeah, in recent memory, he's the greatest Canadian. But all time, it's close, because you got guys like Russ Jackson, who played a very un-Canadian position as well, at quarterback, who can arguably contend for that spot.
Oh, absolutely. And then you got even Andy Fantuz is in
Oh,
the
yeah.
talks too, and you got Doug Brown.
Oh,
and
true.
Scott
Yeah, there's a
Foley.
lot of guys out there. So we'll have to wait and see when Andrew Harris hangs it up and we look back on his career, how he'll be remembered, whether he'll be the greatest of all time for Canadians or if he'll just be, a top three guy, which right now I think is fair to put him in that spot. Alright, so last week, Sean Lemon was traded to the BC Lions in exchange for Devon Coleman, the swap between the league bottom feeding teams of the BC Lions and the Toronto Argonauts. So how do you guys think Lemon looked last game?
Well, I think with him playing in Toronto, he only had one sack all year, and then he comes to BC, and in his first game, he's got 2 sacks and a couple tackles. So I think it's an improvement for him, and hopefully he can help change things around in BC.
Yeah, I agree once again. So far, we're off to a good start with both each other. But it's the change of scenery, and it's funny because you could say it's almost like the second time's a charm because he made this exact transition once before. And like you said, that first game he looked much better, maybe a little possessive. I feel like he's playing for some like Toronto in a bad team, bad situation. They don't want him again, so I think he's got a little fire under his stomach. Yeah, the Lions, they're not where they want to be, but I feel they're still building. When you got Mike Riley, one of the best players in the league, you always got someone on your side. So I feel like he's gonna keep playing with that fire, and that's something I can't wait if he can.
I would have to agree with most of that. I thought he looked really good. He might be playing with a little something extra after getting traded and being a healthy scratch for so long. He's probably playing a bit mad. And when players are playing mad, that sometimes brings out the best in some of them. And I think that's the case for Lemon, as he had those sacks. And he also had a forced fumble that game, which was very impressive.
Yeah, I believe
Yep.
so.
And then, have we diagnosed what is wrong with the BC Lions yet? Is it still the offensive line? Is it inexperience? What is it at this point?
Well, I personally think that it's a little bit of everything. You got your line that can't block, your coaching that seems to be young and inexperienced, and it's really showing now. And your defense is letting everything get past them. So I think that there's more than one problem in B.
Yeah, I mean that certainly could be said, but as a former high school quarterback, maybe I'm a little biased here, but I really think it's the offensive line. I mean, seeing the hits Mike Riley's take, it's not only taking the hits and not being able to score; it's that mentally he must. I can't imagine what's going through his head because the start of the season's just been atrocious. That timing in his head's probably all messed up. Getting rid of the ball, can't go through his read, probably rushing a little bit. So I mean, I really got to pin this on the offensive line, maybe fairly, maybe unfairly, but yeah, that's where I
I
really
would have to agree with most of that as well. I'm glad we're all agreed with each other all of a sudden. Yeah, I know,
you
but
gotta get mad.
I think the O line with BC it's definitely gotten marginally better these past two games now that BC managed to acquire another tackle, an American tackle, instead of using a national at that position, which typically is not a Canadian position, and some of the guys they put there definitely struggled this year. But again, they've gotten marginally better in the O line, and you can see it in their offense. They're so slowly starting to score again a little bit more, bit by bit. And with coaching, I think there's a lot of inexperience with that coaching staff, like Jarius Jackson, Devon Claybrooks. The only experienced staff member I think that they have that's notable is probably their defensive coordinator, Rich Stubler. And I think most of their problems is that and their depth. Besides a couple of guys you can name on offense, who they got? Mike Riley, Deron Carter, Lamar Durant, Brian Burnham. What do you got after that? You got
Just
like
a
a
lot of
lot of
skill
depth
guys.
players. Like, are you going to tell me Katoy is going to be starting for really any other team? No disrespect to Katoy, but probably not. Especially at that position that he's at on the team. And
Well, and that's the thing too, that it's they're missing a lot of consistency. Like, you know, Duron Carter hasn't had his breakout game yet this year, and Burnham will have a great game, and then he'll have another game where he drops some balls, and John White will have a very productive day, but then the next game,
it's true.
it's lacking consistency, I think too.
Yeah, they need it all to click. You have to have a game. Everybody's on. Everybody's bringing their A game. You see the good teams. That's what they do. They bring it every week. When someone's not playing to their best, some guy picks up the slack, and in DC, you just don't
Yeah,
see
I'd
it.
have to agree with that as well. But one thing was, oh, what's his name? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. Um, of course, there's so much wrong with BC. Hopefully they get better. Hopefully they start clicking and start to get competitive again. But I don't think this is their year. I think it's safe to say that. And also during that Bombers Lions game, we had the first notable game by a global player. As you guys may have saw, former Potsdam Royal Theodric Hansen was all over the field that game. He had a forced fumble. Playing defense, usually those global players, they're relegated to special teams or they're just like a token guy on the roster. But Hansen was getting reps and he got to play and he made an impact. So, in what happened with that, what do you guys think of the CFL's global initiative now that global players actually made an impact in a game?
Well, I think it's going to take a while for it to set in for every team that when they can find a good player like that, but I think it's the right place to start. I mean, you look at the CFL making the announcement of all the global players, and then the NFL did the exact same thing a couple months after. So I think we're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, at first you shake your head a little bit. You're like, are these guys legit? But like we said, football is a very North American game. America, Canada, that's where it really the hotbed for. But anything where football is spreading, I'm down for it. Spread one of the greatest games in the world. So it was good to see. Obviously we don't expect every team firing with their foreign guys and everybody's balling out. But this is just great to see, and I think this is what the CFL intends. intended it to be. So hopefully we see more and more stories.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree. I like the global initiative. I think it's a great thing. I know some people have been pushing back on it, with the game struggling at home a little bit recently. Why are we focusing on expanding it throughout other borders? But it also helps too to develop the game, in Europe or Central America. If kids that are coming up, because all they think about is soccer, right? Like, if you're a good athlete, you're playing soccer in those places. But if they think, hey, I'm pretty good at this football thing, the CFL's recruiting guys from down here, maybe I should keep going with this sport and continue it, then I think we're going to see down the road more talent develop in these countries that aren't normally associated with football or American Canadian football.
More
exactly.
options. Great.
And now the big question from last game: how screwed are the Bombers without Nichols?
Well, I think that it's going to be pretty interesting because Chris Streveler isn't a bad quarterback, but he's also not the most consistent. He can run, but he's not the best at throwing. And I mean, in the next 3 weeks, you play Edmonton this week, and then you play Saskatchewan back to back. So you got to try to get at least one win out of those 3 games, to try to feel safe with your 7-2 record rate.
Yeah, it's funny because if you look back last year, Chris Trevor is like one of the hot prospects, and he still very well is one of the top young guys. But funny how the Tides kind of turn bad games, rough outings when he fills in. People kind of are unsure with Chris Trevor. I think obviously he's that spark plug quarterback. He's gonna play with that fire in him. But I think this year he's thrown 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions in time. So it's really gonna be a toss up. He's gonna go in there, and you might see him light it up, use legs, use arms, really rejuvenate that offense with some explosive plays. Or you might see him shy away from that consistency that Nichols brings, and he might, cough up the ball, turn it over, miss some throws. So it's a toss-up. I agree with you guys. They could steal a win from Saskatchewan. Just, not fall too deep. They don't have to improve so much. It's just kind of stay afloat until Matt.
Well, this injury sure put the Nichols haters in Winnipeg in their place, because last year they were booing him at Labor Day Classic, along with the Rider fans and the Banjo Bowl as well. He was just getting booed from all directions. And now that he's hurt, the sky is falling, So, I think maybe they squeeze... I don't think they beat Saskatchewan. I think that defense is too good. And Saskatchewan actually has the 2nd best offense in the Canadian Football League right now. So, the only win I can see them stealing is probably that Edmonton game in their next 3, because, yeah, Edmonton's got a really good defense, but you can shut down the passing game on Trevor Harris, and CJ Gable, besides one real game this year, he hasn't been a world-beating running back. So, it could be interesting to see that Edmonton Bomber game. If Streveler is going to win one, I think that's his best chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad point.
No, yeah, I agree as well.
For our next topic, we're going to be covering the Eskimos-Toronto game. Obviously, Edmonton winning that one. So, how much more can the Argos bear before Corey Chamberlain gets put in the hot seat?
Well, I think he even said it best this week that nobody's job is really safe in Toronto at the moment. Like, they're looking at shopping James Wilder Jr. around, but they want to give him the best opportunity. But if you can't get a win on the board, it looks bad on everybody. So I think change is coming there. It's just a matter of when.
I mean, I understand what people are saying, but I feel like we gotta relax. It's his first year as head coach. But it's not too long ago. You guys, you get your 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 years as a player, as a coach. Then you look into the world of professional football, how the Cardinals shipped away Josh Rosen. They fired their coach after 1 year. So, I mean, personally, maybe I'm just old school, even being kind of a younger guy. I feel like he should be given time, at least 2 years. But, I mean, it also wouldn't be crazy to tell them pull the plug, because it's been a really rough. Been a really
True. I think what they're gonna do is they're gonna give him this season as a grace period. They're gonna see how things look, and if maybe they find some bright notes near the end of the year, and they figure out, okay, maybe we're going to keep this quarterback, because they do have some. They have some similar tiered quarterbacks with Franklin, Claros, and Macbeth over there. So
Oh yeah,
I think they're going to figure out which guy they're going to rock with, and especially with Franklin being a free agent in the off season. We'll have to see what happens with that, and if they keep playing fairly poorly, let's say, I do think Corey Chamberlain might be looking for another job next year. He's a case of a guy that I think he's a great coordinator. He is known for having wonderful defenses, but I don't know how he is as a head coach, because if you remember his last year in Saskatchewan, he was 1-8. And Toronto this year has only won one game. So I'm not sure. Oh,
Well, and not to take away from the Rough Riders' Grey Cup win in 2013, but we also had a pretty stacked team that we bought that year. So, I mean, it wasn't really all him. So I think he's got some struggles in the coaching
I would have to
position
agree,
right now.
especially if you remember in 2013 or 2014, he did have an argument with Richie Hall of all people on their defensive knowledge. And as much as I respect Chamberlain as a defensive coordinator, Richie Hall too is just a legend in his own right. So the fact that those two had a clash and that led to Richie Hall getting fired from Saskatchewan, who's now running one of the top defenses in Winnipeg of all places, it's a little interesting to me to see kind of how the two's careers are going right now. And then, can we diagnose a problem for the Argonauts right now? Or is it just everything?
I think it's a little bit too much of everything right now. Like they have young quarterbacks, but they're unproven. And I mean, like you said, James Franklin is a free agent, and he's going to go into this offseason with little tape on himself, and it's not good tape. And your defense is underperforming. You had to bring Bear Woods back out of free agency because none of the guys on your roster were doing good. So I think they got a lot of problems there. I don't think you can diagnose it to one thing right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's similar to the Beast situation where there's a lot of, I mean, like you were saying, it's more than just the offensive line. I think it was the offensive line. For Toronto, I think it's a little thing. And I think, yeah, the one good thing though I do want to say is they've had a little more progress. So their offense has been a little bit with Macbeth. He's been playing a lot because his job's on. I think he knows.
Yep, I think they stick with James Franklin as their guy for next year because he's the youngest of the bunch. Franklin's 28, which is still decently young for a quarterback in this league. Claros is around 30, and so is Macbeth. So I think if they're going to cut ties, it'll be with probably Claros or Macbeth next year. Especially with the two young backups they have in Michael O'Connor and Dakota Prukop, who a lot of people have been calling for Prukop to get a shot.
Yes, sir.
So we'll have to see what they end up doing there.
Well, I mean, at this point in the season, why not give him a shot? Like, you're the bottom of the barrel. You got nothing to lose. And, I mean, that's all it took for Saskatchewan was to give Cody a shot after Zach was hurt and not try to bring in some veteran. And look how it turned out for the Riders. So, I mean, what really could be the worst possible scenario for them if they did?
I'm inclined to agree, especially with that receiving core, man. Like, they got S.J. Green. They got Darrell Walker. They got Armani Edwards. That team has such a good receiving core. You'd have to be a god-awful quarterback not to just even do semi-well in that offense. But that defense there, too, man. Their defense has to get it together.
Yeah, but by no means, I'm not comparing him to the guy. I'm just saying he kind of plays with the same type of fire and same type of skill set. But I got almost like a Vernon Adams type of guy. He's gonna use his speed. He's gonna, because Prukop plays a little special. So he's that athletic quarterback. Has an arm as well. Haven't been able to see on the regular season as much as we'd like, but I really am hoping he gets a shot. I don't know. We'll see down the stretch. But I just want to see. I think there's something special about it.
Alright, so for topic 3, the next game, obviously Hamilton versus the Red Blacks last week. So did Dane Evans take the next step, do you guys think? Did he prove that the Ticats are going to be fine without Mazzoli, or do you still have your doubts?
Oh, I definitely have my doubts. I mean, they only scored 1 touchdown last game, or sorry, 2, but he's not putting up the best numbers. I mean, he threw 300 yards, but he was 1 touchdown, 2 picks with 61% completion. So, I think they took a big step back with Dane Evans, and I don't see him being a starter anywhere else. I think it's kind of circumstantial that he got to be the starter in Hamilton, but I don't see it going on much longer than this season.
Yeah, I mean, by the way he's played the past few weeks, why people are saying that. But I mean, I think I remember they shipped Johnny Manziel and they signed Dane Evans. Really believe in him. You know, he's supposedly looked really good in practice. I do understand he hasn't really shown that to the public and in the game scenarios. But yeah, this game wasn't pretty by no means. I feel like he's a guy, and he's gonna fight for your team. I think they'll be in good hands this year. I think he'll definitely lead them to the playoffs. But you know, I agree with you guys. I don't want to agree like Dane Evans, but yeah,
I'm inclined to have mixed feelings on this one because, on one hand, yeah, I've heard Ticats reporters and people from that area sing praises on Dane Evans about how great he is, how big his arm is, just how ready he was, but I don't know. He threw a couple picks in the end zone there. I get that he's young and trying to stretch it out, but I don't know. I think he's a perfectly serviceable quarterback, no doubt, but he's certainly a step down from Mazzoli. And I don't have as much faith in him. I do think they're making the playoffs still, obviously in that weaker East Division. I think they give whoever they play in the playoffs a good run for their money, but overall, I do not see them winning the East. I don't think they can beat Montreal or a Western crossover team.
Yeah.
No, me neither. Go ahead.
It'll be interesting to see. I was just gonna say, you know, like we said, it's up in the air. It's gonna be he could either all prove us wrong or gonna, you know, kind of play what he's been doing and just that serviceable backup guy. So
all right. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I think.
So our Ottawa receiver is a no-fly zone in fantasy. I don't know how to feel about this because a lot of people like Dominic Rhymes and RJ Harris, and Dom Davis has just been so inconsistent. Like, he'll have games where, you know, like, Rhymes was absolutely clowning Marshall, the Riders DB, that one game. Like, the dude just couldn't play any better, but Rhymes was just beating him left, right, and center. And then he'll go quiet for a while, and then he'll have a couple other big games. And you can say that about a lot of their receiving core. So, would you be enticed enough to pick a Red Blacks receiver in fantasy?
Definitely not. There's only been 1 week where Dominic Davis has thrown more touchdowns than interceptions. And, I mean, he's got 5 touchdowns, 11 interceptions so far. He's got 1,800 yards, which isn't bad, but though they couldn't score in the red zone, the game ended in the red zone with 3 incompletions, and it almost ended the same way last week. I think what happened, Ottawa's kind of suffering consequences of letting everyone walk this
year. Yeah, I agree as well. I really don't think you could pin it on the receivers. It's just the guy getting them the ball, and he really hasn't been consistent, and it's not even consistent. It's just he hasn't been a whole lot of good this season. He had that flash of goodness versus Saskatchewan earlier in the season, but yeah, really, it's the quarterback. You know, receivers can only do so much.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree. There are certain offenses, take Calgary, for example, where they have a wealth of receiving talent, and any of their guys could go off any game. I don't think that's the case for Ottawa. Rhymes and RJ Harris, they're perfectly good receivers, but The quarterback play in Ottawa just is not consistent enough. And whether that's Dom Davis or Jennings, they're going to be looking for a quarterback in free agency, whether that's Vernon Adams, whether that's James Franklin, or whether that's someone else next year. They're probably going to, that's a position of need for them right now, let alone down the road.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they got two decent running backs in Crockett and Maduka. I mean, they're great, but it's that quarterback position where are you going to bring in a veteran? Are you going to try to develop Jennings and Davis with a veteran, or are you going to bring in some blood and see how it goes? But I think they definitely have.
Yeah, I mean, I like you were saying, are they going to give someone else a shot? Will aren't, but I think yeah, it's definitely not Dom. Maybe Jonathan Jennings. But the thing is, I loved how Jennings played in that. He was on BC and he had that awesome season. But his consistency as well, he's had kind of taken a downfall. I think he still has it in him because he had some great passing numbers that year. But and as far as Dom Davis, I think the best he'll be. I like the guy, player, but I think a backup, career backup, and a short yardage quarterback.
Yep. I'm inclined to agree
Yep.
there. With Jennings, the reason you've seen him drop off so much, I've heard in CFL circles, is because he is good against man defense, but he has problems reading zones. So that's why you've seen that drop off. Again, this is all theoretical. This is just sources that I've heard. Could be hogwash, but Jennings has not looked good since that season. So maybe there's something there that we as fans don't typically see. Alright, so Lewis Ward, the longest professional streak of field goals made. And of course, we're excluding playoffs because he missed two, but in the playoffs last year, I guess only regular season counts. So his streak ended at 69 this week. As he missed, he got a standing ovation from the Ottawa crowd. Where do you see his career going following this, and do you think his record will ever be broken?
Well, I think he's got a good road ahead of him in the CFL. I mean, literally missed one field goal at a 70. So I think he's got a good road ahead of him, and who knows, maybe he'll get the Brett Maher shot and he'll get to go to the NFL one day.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a great kicker, as we could see. The numbers don't lie, like you were saying. I thought it was such a cool. Saw the crowd stand up, give him a huge hand. They really knew how special it was. It's funny because he started a streak back up. What was it, like 2 or 3? Got a few more in that game. But yeah, like NFL would be great, but I think he's setting himself up for a great CFL career, and that's not at least in meaning in a great way. Like that's good for him. He's going to make some money up here.
Yeah, what I think for Lewis
Yeah.
Ward is I think he's gone to the NFL next year because I believe his contract is up, and people have been paying attention to the streak north and south of the border. So I think he probably gets a look in the NFL next year. You've seen CFL kickers previously get looks, like for example Brett Maher, Justin Medlock in previous years, Swayze Waters, Ty Long right now with the Chargers. You can see some of these guys getting shots. I think Lewis Ward has a very good shot next year of getting some tryouts, maybe getting along in preseason, and I think he has a good shot of catching on next year in the NFL.
And yeah, I definitely don't think that record will be. I bet.
That's okay. It was a two-part question. We all miss. But yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be a long time before that streak ever gets broken too.
Oh yeah.
So, I guess we sort of talked about this one briefly, but do you guys still think Hamilton can win the East and maybe still has a shot at the Grey Cup?
Well, I think they can win the East still. I don't see competition to catch up to them. Uh, they're 7-2, and the closest is 4-4 behind them. It's a pretty steep drop off. I think Hamilton still wins, but I don't think they.
Yeah, I don't think Hamilton actually. As you guys know, probably in our like show text message group chat, a big Vernon Adams fan, big Alouettes guy. So I really think they're going to take it this year. And like we were talking about the struggles the Cats have been having, I don't think.
I'm
I hope
also a
you're
big
right.
Vernon Adams fan. So that's good to see. We've got the VA fan club going on here.
There we go. Oh yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
the listeners will realize that I might be a little loved him since college, but yeah. So prepare, listeners. Will be very strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't see Hamilton winning the East and getting to the Grey Cup. I think Montreal right now is the better team, especially if everybody's healthy. Well, obviously Mazzoli's out for the year, but with the teams they have right now, if you asked me to pick one to win, I would just roll with Montreal because I think they're just overall a better team. Alright, so for the last game of the week, we had Montreal versus Calgary, which turned out to be a very interesting game, as a few people predicted that, but most people said Calgary is going to walk all over Montreal. And I believe Montreal ended up stealing that game, did they not? Yep.
Oh, they did.
And then another question we're having now is, will Calgary be the best in the West with Bo Levi coming back? Or are they the favorite to win the West?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, they're sitting in fourth place right now. I think Saskatchewan is a better team overall than Calgary at the moment, but I think Edmonton will take the West, and Winnipeg will fall to maybe second or third.
Uh, I mean that's a great take. I disagree though. I think Winnipeg's going to be able to. I don't think Calgary's gonna win the West, even with Levi coming back. Be a little too late. But with that being said, just very briefly, Bo is still Bo. I know thinking like he's hurt. Arbuckle's looking good, but come on, Bo's a dude who can play, and when he comes back, if they sneak into the playoffs and they're gonna make some.
Bo, if anything he has shown us in the Canadian Football League, he has shown us he is a winner. And I think when he comes back in a week or two, that Calgary wins the West. I think it's going to be probably Calgary, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and Edmonton becomes the crossover team, especially with how streaky Trevor Harris can be sometimes. So,
Yeah, true.
I do see Calgary winning the West this year.
On just another kind of take on that, like I don't think it matters what position Calgary up in. It just matters about getting into the race of the playoffs, and I think, no matter where they end up, they'll end up going far in the playoffs with Bo having some time off and able to rest and rehab. I just don't see him winning the West, but they'll definitely be a dogfight for sure.
I was just thinking, imagine if they cross over. If you're an East Division team, we're just seeing them in the playoffs, man. That would be terrible.
Oh, that'd be really bad.
Absolutely.
Imagine, yeah, having Calgary as the cross.
I think they'd probably break that streak of no Western team ever crossing over and going to the Grey Cup if that were to actually happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we can agree there.
Yep.
Alright, now for another question we have. Are the Calgary receivers making Arbuckle look good? Or is he just a good quarterback in his own right?
I personally think it's a bit of both. Like, I don't think he's the best quarterback to ever play, but I think that he definitely has done some stuff that's pretty good. And Calgary, it doesn't matter time after time and year after year, they just find someone to replace somebody, and it's always worked. And I just think that when you have a system like that anything is really possible with them.
Yeah, like you said, Arbuckle's a very good player. Knowing he could play in this league, but Calgary's such a great. They're a well-oiled machine. For the past couple years, just coaching staff, players. So I think he's in a great position, but he is showing off. He is showing he could play, but I think it's more of the team.
Alright, so do the Alouettes have a dual running back threat with Jeremiah Johnson and Stanback? Jeremiah Johnson last week recording over 100 yards against the Calgary Stampeders.
I think they have a good tandem back there. I don't think best in the league, but it's definitely a good tandem. If Will Stanback is arguably, in my opinion, top 3 running backs in the CFL right now. But Jeremiah Johnson, he's got some experience in the CFL, and I think that plays to his advantage. And I mean, all the best to them in Montreal. It's great for the CFL and them if they succeed.
Yeah, I definitely think Stanback. He's definitely a clear number guy, but they definitely do have a 1-2 punch. And you think having a 1-2 punch at running back, it's not only you have 2 separate guys to stand for, it's that you're giving the other guy rest. So like, you could also have him in at the same time, switch up the looks for the defense. More importantly, Stanback's in, Johnson's getting rest. Johnson comes in, Stanback gets a blow. They come in all fresh. Just makes the defense head spin.
I have to agree with most of those points. However, I don't think they can be really used as a dual threat because they fulfill similar roles, do they not? They're both more or less power backs, and it's not like a situation where one guy's a super speedy, elusive back, and then you can bring in the guy to pound the rock. So I don't know if it's a dual back, but
yeah,
as far as depth, yeah, I
just
think
giving each other rest though.
this is one of the top in the league.
Yeah, it's good depth. I mean, you look at BC got Rutley and John White, and Rutley's kind of pounder, and John White's your quick guy. Same as Saskatchewan, you got Powell, who's every down back, who's not the fastest, but he's very strong, and got Thigpen.
Absolutely. And has Montreal ended the streak 6 years without finding the Calvillo successor? Have they found it in Vernon Adams Jr.?
I think so personally. I didn't really watch a whole bunch of college back then or Vert, but I've been a fan of him ever since he got here. And when he was with Saskatchewan, I was pretty mad when they got rid of him. But no, I think that they found their guy and then to roll with him and let him play. Let him have a bad game. Let him have his good games. Don't pull him out when you feel like you have to. I think he's.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. Oh yeah, I think he's the guy. I think they found the replacement.
Yep, VA sure looks like the real thing. I could have seen a couple years ago Jonathan Crompton maybe being the Calvillo successor, but as of right now, it's Vernon Adams' job to lose. I've loved this guy since he's been in the league. Even when he first got to Montreal, he was 2-1 when he started there originally, and then he bounced around for a while, and ended up coming back to the team this year as the 4th string quarterback. This guy almost got cut,
yeah,
and he has absolutely been dominant this year. So I'm really glad to see Vernon Adams balling out, and I do think he's the heir apparent to Calvillo, and they need to pay that man whatever he wants to keep him around, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Good point.
So is Reggie Bagleton, is he talking his way into being a top 3 wide receiver in the league? If not now, in the future?
I think so. I mean, you look at the stats overall right now. 3rd in the league for yards. 3rd in the league for touchdowns for receivers right now. So I think he's played with Bo Levi and Nick Arbuckle, and he hasn't lost any his play. So I think he's definitely working his way up to be one of the best receivers in the CFL for sure.
Yeah, if he keeps playing like he did last week, just improving the little nuance, playing receiver, just doing the loan work, getting better each week, each year. I mean, there's no doubt this guy's going to be one of the top receivers. I mean, he is one of the top receivers right now, but to get to that next, I think he definitely.
I think for now he's a top 10, top 5 receiver right now. Top 3 in my opinion right now. Even some names that are more or less in contention. You got Shaq Evans. Ricky Collins is having a great year. Greg Ellingston, Burnham. Like, there's so many guys that are great receivers this year, man. But I don't think he's a top 3 right now. Could he be eventually? Yeah, maybe when Bo comes back, if he decides to hit up one target, and that target happens to be Bangleton, I think you could absolutely maybe put him in there in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. And I mean, there's a pretty big gap between the next Calgary, and that's Eric Rogers. I mean, even in yardage here, you just look, Reggie's got 704 yards, and Eric Rogers has 450. So, I mean, he's becoming the number one target there in Calgary.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, he's becoming the dude in that lineup. It's gonna be fun to watch him playing and growing and keep taking on that role.
So on to the juicy topic, CFL fantasy. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the CFL. I love CFL fantasy because I always miss the draft when it comes to fantasy in other leagues like NBA or NFL. Whereas the CFL is every week, you can just go on, you set your lineup, and you can leave it alone. I love it. And I'm pretty good in fantasy. Overall, currently, I am in the top 250 in the league. The highest I've been, I think, is 183rd. So I've been doing decent. I've had a couple bad weeks though, these last two. So I'm hoping to bounce back.
It's tough not to have a bad week. The week I had Sean Thomas Erlington in the lineup before he.
Oh yeah, that injury
went out. Yeah, so it's definitely harder, I think, in CFL fantasy because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and as far as me, I've never been a great fantasy guy in any sport. But I think that's CFL fantasy tricky, but more fun. You have every week's a new week. You can kind of switch it up, but yeah, and you just never know. Got some guys are hot. And
completely agree. Like look at Trevor Harris, or not Trevor Harris. Sorry, Andrew Harris. This past week, he has been a lock in my lineup for every single week, but after that 7.3 point week last week, and the fact his price went up from around 10,000 to 11,000 this week, he's not my lineup this week for the first time ever.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Yeah, same here.
Alright, so quick recap of notable fantasy news from the past week. Reggie Bangleton has the best performance by any player all year in fantasy, passing William Stanback's 41 points and getting roughly... Oh yeah, Calgary's not there in my notes, so... Yeah, but Bangleton had a very strong week.
He had
40 what, sorry?
43.9
points. That's just such a good week. And then, another note, Harris had the best fantasy performance. This is Trevor Harris, of course, not Andrew. I'm gonna get that mixed up, I swear. He had the best of any QB all year for a quarterback, passing Vernon Adams Jr. Trevor Harris scored 41 this week. The previous high by VA was 36. For steer clear notes, I have stay clear of Greg Elliston. Obviously, the philosophy here is you don't want to chase big games, because you know who's also chasing? The defensive coordinator of that opposing team. They're going to key in on a certain guy and say, hey, Greg Elliston went off last game, so we got to try to contain him. And that might open things up for another receiver like Ricky Collins or DeVaris Daniels. But Greg Elliston's going to see a bit more attention from the defense next week. And with his price shooting up to over $9,000, I can't justify picking him at that price.
Oh, me neither.
Good point.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see, though.
And then Ottawa receivers, obviously we talked about that earlier in the podcast. Inconsistent quarterback play is a death sentence for anybody in the CFL. And I think that's what Ottawa's suffering from. Reggie Bangleton, same thing. You don't want to chase big games. That may not apply to this week, but next week, obviously, with Calgary being on a bye. Again, defenses are going to be keyed in on Begelton more, so that might open things up more for an Eric Rogers. And again, his price is likely to jump significantly.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think those are some good opinions made. I would definitely stay clear of any Ottawa receiver. Just too much inconsistency, and you're playing a good defense in Saskatchewan, and I think Dominic Davis is going to get lit up.
Yeah.
No, continue.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna just piggyback on the point. The Ottawa receivers, Phil Dominic Davis can show improvement week to week. I would definitely say.
Yep, so I think we got all our bases covered on our steer clear. So I wrote down the best options that I think are there for each week. For this week, I have Vernon Adams at $9,500, Cody Fajardo at $7,900, and Dane Evans at around $5,500. What do you guys think of those options? Am I missing somebody, or should someone be excluded from that list?
Well, no, I think that's a pretty good list there. I personally, my lineup back, and my only other option that I'd want to go with would be Adams. I don't think it's bad picks.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all three there. Like we said before, I go. And yeah, Fajardo, Evans, and versus that BC defense, we were thinking. So maybe he could put up some numbers this week.
Yeah, I agree. For some people who are wondering, well, Trevor Harris has had a massive week. Why isn't he in there? With Trevor Harris, again, when players have big games, their prices tend to shoot up astronomically. He's around $12,000, and against the Winnipeg defense, which is one of the best against the pass in the CFL, I don't think it's the best bang for your buck to go for Trevor Harris this week. A dark horse pick, though, for me would be Chris Streveler. I know some people love or hate him. He could get some interesting rushing points, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing with him. He might not be able to get you 400 yards passing and get you a couple rushing touchdowns and good rushing yards too. So I think you're right in that being a dark horse.
And I think if he could stay clean, no turnovers, it could be a good week. But we got to see if he could do it.
So this is a rough week for running backs for me. I have CJ Gable. I think he's reasonably priced. Well, obviously on my list. Sorry, I have Gable and at 8,500. What do you guys think of that? Who else should be on that list?
I think that's a good pick. I mean, Gable should have a decent, not been 25 point guy, but been putting up good numbers. My good running back that I have locked in was Cameron Marshall. I just think that starts against BC that they don't really have a good front seven, so I think that he could have a really good game.
Yeah, I think Gable's a safe pick. He's gonna put up the numbers. He's gonna play well. He's not gonna have a very bad game. Really, he's always gonna give you a good outing. But I kind of went with a dark horse type of guy this week. I went with Malik. I think he's gonna play well. He hasn't had any stellar. I feel like I don't know. I have faith in him this week. I guess that's what I.
So that's interesting. You
We'll see
two
what
picked
happens.
two running backs from the same team, so it's going to be interesting to see who starts there. And that is, you're going to have to pay attention to the depth charts, you two. But absolutely.
10 a.m.
But for me, honestly, I have Stanback and Crockett in my lineup. I know they're both currently listed as injured, but I've heard reports that Crockett was almost ready to go last week, and they just didn't want to risk re-injuring whatever his injury was against, I believe he was playing Hamilton. So he's probably ready to go against Sask. Stanback, similar thing. He's probably going to get some time against Toronto. And I think those two are going to be my backs. If, for whatever reason, Stanback isn't good to go, I'll probably rock with Jeremiah Johnson. And obviously, if Crockett isn't good to go either, I'll switch up to Cameron Marshall.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. I have Stanback and Marshall as my running backs right now. I'd swap Johnson in. Irons gets the start over Cameron Marshall, I'll be looking for someone maybe like William Powell or John White.
Interesting. But yeah, I'm Irons starting this.
Oh, you're banking on it? Alright, fair risk, fair risk.
Hopefully. I'll put in a call.
Alright, sure thing. Alright. So for wide receivers here, I have listed DeVere Posey at around 6,300. Shaq Evans at 64. Lamar Durant at 5,500. Addison at 6,300. And Quan Bray coming in at a little over 3,700. What do you guys think of those receiver picks? Am I missing somebody? Or is there somebody who shouldn't be on that list that's not worth considering?
Well, I think you made good picks there. Like personally, I have DeVaris Daniels and over $7,000. I'm have a toss up between Ricky Collins and just for a cheap pick, I got Deron Carter. Hopefully, he'll have a breakout game. Not very likely, but no, I think Quan Bray really good pick. Talked about it off air here. The chemistry that him and Vernon Adams are developing is really good, and I mean, even Braylon Addison, he's having a great year in Hamilton too. So I think those guys are really good picks.
Yeah, I think the guys you hit the nail on the head. They're all good picks. Yeah, I was going to piggyback on all that connection all the way back in Chris Ottawa. When VA scrambled, when he did that big play, he certainly out of first. He gave it up to Bray, as we saw. I think he was the guy last week when he put it up and it hit the crossbar. That was Bray under it. So I think when he makes his catches, he might not have a lot of volume, but he'll have 2 catches for like 80 yards and a touchdown, like a catch for 60 yards. So it'll be, if you want that big play guy for big play.
I would incline to agree there. Bray is certainly a good option. I have him in my lineup, I'm not going to lie. Tried to fit in Posey. I think you have to have a Montreal receiver this week with Toronto being one of the worst, if not the worst, passing defense in the entire league. You have to fit in one receiver from Montreal, and I think if you're going to do that, it's got to be either DeVere Posey or Quan Bray. I think if you go with Geno Lewis, I think you're chasing just a little bit. So, that's...
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, sure, go.
Can I just interrupt real quickly? Sorry, it just popped in my head. Talking about Montreal receiver, guy who gets overlooked a lot. He's not going to get you like the yards maybe Bray will have. Quite the opposite. He'll have a lot of catches, and that's Weineke. So he has about 11 catches, and 4 of them are touchdowns. That's insane. The guy has a zone. My bad. I didn't check his value, but the guy no one really talks about.
That's true. He is an interesting pick in fantasy, in my opinion, because he is a guy that it's go big or go home. He's priced at $2,500, I believe, this week. He, like you said, he has 11 catches all of this year, which isn't much, but 4 of those have been touchdowns. So he's certainly a guy that's worth considering. But I do think Posey or Bray is definitely a safer option this week if you're going to pick a Montreal receiver.
Yeah, agreed.
So moving on, if you believe in picking defenses in fantasy, I used to be on this bandwagon up until this year. Now I think CFL defense, picking defenses in fantasy is very situational. This week, if you're going to pick a defense, I have the 2 listed that you probably should pick. Saskatchewan at 5,600 or Montreal at 35. What do you guys think of those 2?
Yeah, I don't use defenses either, but if I did, I would definitely pick one of those guys, and I think kind of a quieter one too. The Hamilton defense at just under $4,000 against BC. I think anything's possible there with the inconsistency that they could have a big point game.
Yeah, I agree with your point just then. Like I said, we were talking off there. Quite frankly, I got to be honest, guys. I just ever is playing Toronto or BC, always going to go with one of them. Kind of crunch the numbers, whichever way. Yeah, that's really my strategy. Montreal, which is a great pick.
I kind of share the same strategy as you, Joe. Like I said, it's situational whether I pick a defense or not. But if it's an absolute can't miss matchup, like if it's Calgary against Toronto, that I'm picking Calgary's defense. Calgary scores a lot of points in fantasy defense just because they're a ball hawk group. Like you got a guy like Trey Roberson there who leads the league in interceptions. They're probably going to get you 10 to 20 points if they have a really good matchup. And a dark horse this week I would potentially consider is the defense playing our quarterback dark horse, Edmonton Eskimos. They come in at about 4,600. Strevler could throw some interceptions, and maybe get sacked a couple of times. So he's certainly an interesting look there if you want to pick a defense. Edmonton could be interesting.
Oh yeah, I
It's a
agree.
great point.
All right,
Same here.
so for value picks, our definition of value picks is players that are under $3,500. For value picks, if you're having cap trouble, I think Chris Matthews is a good option. He's the starting boundary wide receiver for Winnipeg currently, and I think he'll be a safety blanket for Strevler. What do you guys think of that pick, and who are your value picks?
Well, I think that's a good value pick. The one I'd say, a Hamilton receiver like Mike Jones, who hasn't been the most consistent here, but we're up against defense. Anything is really possible.
Oh yeah, that's a great pick too, and I think you guys are on thicker with Hamilton, but a different receiver. Jalen Ackland, last game had 4 targets, catches, 46 yards, and a touchdown. I think he's going to keep it rolling. Dane Evans had struggled at times, but if he could build relationships with receivers, if he could be his blanket, and it seems like last week, 46 yards, a touchdown, the week before 53 yards. It may not be outstanding numbers, but for Dane Evans, I feel like they're getting in the group, and I expect them to continue that this week.
That's definitely interesting. I think if you are screwed enough that you have to pick a $2,500 receiver, Devon Smith is probably your best option. I know we talked about Jacob Weineke, but I believe with that Winnipeg defense shutting down a lot of those big names for Edmonton, I almost said Ottawa there, that Smith will probably get a bit more targets in the passing game. Another Smith that you should look at is Rodney Smith of the Argos. He's had some good games. He's a guy I've just always liked. I think it should be worth considering this week with $2,900 price.
Well, I agree with that too. I mean, you look at McLeod Bethel Thompson. He's not the best quarterback in the league by any means, but thrown four games over 300 yards, and then he's got a couple 200-yard games. So he's thrown it to somebody. So I mean, I don't think that's a bad pick at all.
Yeah, same here. I think I agree with you guys. That was great.
Alright, so moving on to our locks. These are guys that we're 99% sure we're going to have in our lineups. We aren't going to move them. We aren't going to touch them. Even if, you change your lineups daily like me, this guy is 99% of the time going to be in your lineup. So, for me, I stole Joe's lock, and I took big play VA, baby.
Oh, yeah,
I think he's going to have a huge passing game against that Toronto defense, and I think he's going to get some good rushing points as well.
And receiving.
Oh, yeah, that's also true. Don't forget about that. They run trick plays there, too. Yep.
Trick plays, baby.
No, I think that's a good one. I got for my lock this week, I have Cameron Marshall. As long as he's starting, that's the only one out of my lineup if he doesn't start. But I think he's due for a big game, and against BC, I think he's ready for it.
Yeah, the Cameron Marshall one will be interesting to watch. Obviously, big play VA. I'm actually going to go against the grain. I talked about net, but I'm gonna say Greg Ellingson. I'm gonna pick him. He's my lock for this week, and the reason is because if you look at his stats throughout the whole season, it's that he always gets volume. He always gets targeted. You look at the last few games, 14, 6, 8, 8. The least amount of times he's been targeted here, 6. He's gonna get the ball thrown his way, and he can make plays if it's vicinity. Obviously, big game last week, 170 yards, touchdowns. Defensive coordinators will be geared up for him, but I think he's going to catch fire, and he's going to keep this group going. He's going to make the most out of
I
all of his.
completely agree with that, but again, with his price, I can't pick him on principle. But
Yep.
if you need any advice with your lineups, feel free to hit me up at AKA Jimmy Leach or any of these two if you guys want to plug your socials.
Yeah, Taylor Curry SK on Instagram and Twitter.
And I'm Joe _8. That's Instagram, and there's a silent.
If you didn't hear him because his mic was cutting out, that's Horn is his last name with the silent E at the end there. But yeah, feel free to hit us up if you guys need fantasy advice. We're more than willing to help. Alright, so for news this past week, obviously Matt Nichols has a big injury. He's on the 6th game now. He was seen at practice with his arm not in a sling, which some say is a good thing. The Bombers have also reached out to free agent quarterbacks such as Brandon Bridge, Drew Willie, and Kevin Glenn, but Kevin Glenn has turned them down so far. If they are to pick up one of those two quarterbacks of Brandon Bridge or Drew Willie, who do you think they pick up, or do they go off the board and find someone else?
Personally, if I was Winnipeg, I would probably Brandon Bridge, just because Drew Willie is more like Matt Nichols. But I mean, it's a toss-up between both of them. Bridge has played more recently, but Willie was a little more consistent than Brandon Bridge ever was, because we never saw what we wanted to see out of Brandon.
Yeah, I agree. I think Drew Willie is that prototypical drop back passer, similar to Nichols. Brandon Bridge gonna, I feel for the guy. I kind of hope he gets a shot here. The Canadian, he's good for the league. So yeah, one of those two guys. I think Drew Willie probably front runner out of those two. And then this is just kind of a name from left field if we want to kind of think. It's Jeff Matthews. I think if we're going with a wild card, Jeff Matthews, because like Willie, he's a pocket passer. Do I think it's going to be super realistic, but guy that'd be cool to see. But yeah, once again.
Oh, that's certainly interesting. Yeah, I don't know with this one. It's tough because Brandon Bridge is younger than Willie, obviously, and if you want to keep him around as a 4-stringer hanging around the PR or something like that, he could be a guy that you rock with. Drew Willie, he is more like Matt Nichols, so he might fit their system better. If you do remember this, Drew Willie did play last season, but he got hurt very early. So he still has some.
Right.
I think he's still got some in the tank. I liked him when he was in Saskatchewan. I think he just got beat up by a bad O-line. And with a good line in front of him, I'd be curious to see how he plays. Maybe we get a Drew Willie redemption story.
That'd be cool.
Exactly. Where it all went wrong for him, things go right.
What about surprise at 11?
Oh! I think the Bombers would get
Okay.
flashbacks from that because he took the 70K and ran last time, so who knows with that one. I don't think they're going with Durant again.
If we're really going flashback, you guys.
Oh! Rakeem Cato! Oh my goodness.
And he wasn't bad.
He was
I don't know.
He was a decent quarterback. I remember him, man.
The Owls let him go, and I was waiting for him to pick him. Here we are, like 3-4 years later.
You heard it here first, folks. Joe on the bring back Rakeem train. I think it was more of a character issue with him than it was a play issue because he was a good player, but you heard about fights in practice, and I know Deron Carter was involved in some of those, but maybe Rakeem had a bit more to do with it than we know.
Yeah, I think just looking quick, the last time Rakeem Cato played, he played for the Richmond Rough Riders in the American Arena League in 2017. And was cut after one game.
When you're cut from the Arena League, I don't know how long you can keep going.
And that is not the top Arena League. Being an American, that is Let's just say it was
Jeez.
a fault.
All right. So, in other major news, the Argos are shopping star running back James Wilder. What do you guys think is the best landing spot for him? And what is the most likely? So, best spot for him, but also the most likely, or those could be two separate answers.
Well, I personally think one of the better landing spots for him could be Calgary with a
Oh.
good old line in front of him. Just kind of the inconsistency at running back in Calgary. John Jackson just back, but not putting up like 1,000 yards a year right now. But most likely, I think he'll stay in.
Yeah, I think a lot of the teams locked on the Calgary is a great choice. It's a good option. They could get a little tandem with Don Jackson, kind of like how the Avs done. But yeah, I think realistically, not going well. They might have to stick around, and they're going to have to, bite the bullet, and they're going to have to, work through the struggle and
Uh,
something.
I'm inclined to. I think he's going to get traded, especially considering that the coach, the GM, and him met, and he is not happy being a backup or a special teamer. I do think he has the talent to start, but I think that ship has sailed with the Argos. I think two spots that he could land. Calgary is a good one. Another one I would consider is Ottawa, actually. I know Crockett's been good, but I'm still not sold on Moses Madu. So I think Wilder could add an interesting dynamic to that Ottawa offense if they really wanted him. Again, Calgary, yeah, that's good because they haven't really found a consistent running back. Kadeem Carey has looked good at times, so has Romar Morris and Jackson, but none of them can put it up consistently. So Wilder could fit in either of those.
Uh, I agree with that, and I was just gonna think too. I mean, you never know. Maybe even in Hamilton, if Cameron Marshall doesn't perform well, we could see him go out to Hamilton. Because I mean, with Sean Thomas Erlington getting hurt, what else do they have
That's
besides the
interesting.
Giants?
That's definitely interesting. And then the CFL, I love this new rule. Um, they have it so each team releases 10 players on their neg list. I think it's 2 or 3 times a year now. And before this, neg list used to be super secret. You only used to hear about maybe 1 or 2 really notable players that were on each team's neg list. But now they have the system where, again, 10 players from a 45 player neg list get released. And I think it's great for the fans and everything. Joe, you have some players that are notable on neg lists.
Yeah, so like you said, a lot of guys lists come out. So I'm going to try to take a few guys each. This week we're going to specifically focus on the quarterbacks. But once again, a little bias being a former quarterback. So first guy we're going to talk about today is Jake Browning at a University of Washington. The thing is, he's going to have a real good chance with the Vikings. He's in their camp right now. But if it doesn't work out there, I could see down the road getting a shot to ball out in the CFL. The pocket passer who's going to rely on his not shifty, not really super athletic, but very smart guy. And I think if he comes up north, it's going to be a big success. Second name, Manny Wilkins. He with the Packers right now in camp, but not as good as a chance to make it. They're stacked at the quarterback position, and I think he'll be more like a Vernon Adams type player. Not saying come in the league, start and do his thing, but he's going to be more of a shifty guy. And then lastly, Mason Fine, a quarterback out of North Texas, a smaller school, D1 FBS, but he's very short of stature, so you never know if he's going to get the NFL about like 5'8", 5'9", and he might be listed 5'10" or 11, but in reality he's pretty small. But his arm, it's top notch, pro talent. So I think he'll be able to fling the ball all around the field in the season.
So to conclude the podcast, we're going to do our predictions for this week's games. We have Winnipeg versus Edmonton, Ottawa versus Saskatchewan, Hamilton versus BC, and Montreal versus Toronto in the Touchdown Atlantic game. Taylor, who are your picks for this week?
Well, for this week, I got Edmonton beating Winnipeg, Saskatchewan beating Ottawa, Hamilton beating, and Montreal beating Toronto. But I think if I was going to flip one of those, I think this could be the week that BC
Ooh.
possibly wins.
Interesting.
Oh,
I wouldn't bet the farm.
Neither would I on that one. Joe, what are your picks?
so yeah, I'm gonna go Winnipeg, then Saskatchewan over Ottawa. Yeah, Winnipeg over Edmonton, Saskatchewan over Ottawa, Hamilton over BC, and Montreal versus Toronto. And if there's one game, I think it's toss-up. I think it's Winnipeg versus Edmonton. I wouldn't be surprised to see Edmonton win. Honestly, I think they're probably I think Trevor's going to put together and keep the big Winnipeg team, the machine, keep it going. And
Oh, that's interesting, because I got Winnipeg 2 this week. I think, like I said earlier, if Strubler is going to steal a game, it's going to be this week. It's not going to be against Sask. I feel like if Winnipeg can shut down the passing defense or passing of Edmonton, if they could take away that element, I don't think CJ Gable is a world-beating running back. So yeah, if they shut down the passing game, I think they have a good chance of winning that one. Saskatchewan and Ottawa, these are two very different teams than we saw in week 2. Saskatchewan is much, much better, whereas Ottawa has looked a lot worse. And I've got Hamilton beating BC because I think Hamilton's just the better team there. And I have Montreal beating Toronto because I just don't see Toronto pulling that one out.
No.
we could agree on that one.
I think we all have that one. But
if we're all wrong, though.
yeah, we will happily admit if we screw up and Toronto pulls some amazing win against Montreal. But I don't see that happening. That concludes the podcast. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. We are going to have timestamps. I know it's a little late to say that at the very end of the podcast, but for future reference. So maybe you don't care about fantasy or want to skip to one of the games. We're going to have it in the description of the YouTube video. So you can just go ahead and skip to the parts you want to see or the parts you don't want to see. You can skip over those. We are going to eventually open up a Patreon. If you support us, what that will go towards is we are going to hook up a SoundCloud account in the future so we can expand this podcast, hopefully to Apple and Spotify and all the platforms that you listen to podcasts with. But as of right now, we're content with staying on YouTube. If we get successful, we are going to eventually expand to those other networks, though.
Can't wait.
Yeah, and just one more thing. Thank you for you guys listening today. This was just the day one small step. We're going to improve, we're going to grow, we're going to keep getting better every time, and just keep talking what the great league,
Exactly. I know we're recording this later at night, and we're all pretty tired, but we're also new at this. This is my first time ever doing anything like this, so I know I made some mistakes for sure. I think we're all going to get better as we progress, but hopefully you stick with us and continue this journey. Again, thank you for watching. Remember to click like, share this with your friends, and be sure to subscribe. This is the True North CFL podcast signing off.